So I discovered Millana Snow a couple of years ago, and it was really nice to see another woman of color in the space. And at that time, she had been featured in lots of magazines, writing lots of articles, and it was just so inspirational. And we were able to meet in person last year, and it was such a fun time together. I mean, it really felt electric. She had so many things to share with me. We had a great conversation, and I know that she has been very inspirational to many women and many women of color who want to get into this space. But she is also just so genuine, so authentic, and always asking like, how can I help you? How can I lift you up? She really cares about that. And so I was really excited to have her on the podcast to share about her Saturn return because, like so many women on this podcast, their Saturn returns really was the push to define themselves, to be a healer, to be an intuitive, a psychic, a medium, whatever label you want to use. It just means the same thing, stepping into their power. And a Saturn return, is just such a pivotal time. And so it was fun to hear her story about all the struggles that she has been through and how she's been able to kind of get to the other side. I know that many of you will feel very inspired by this. And the second half of the interview with Millana will be about the energetics of money. So don't forget to catch it next week. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Millana, it is so nice to have you on the podcast. For those who aren't familiar with her, Millana Snow is an energy healer as well as the founder of Wellness Official. I encountered her a couple years ago on Instagram, and I just really loved everything that you shared. And so, can you share a little bit more about yourself and how you got into the wellness space?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me, Alice. I'm so glad to be here with you. This is fun. Well, I have been a healer for about 10 years full time, and it is really still to this day funny to call myself that because my whole life has been oriented around seeking healing. And while I've had many, many careers and many lives, my biggest and most prominent story and theme has always been around healing myself and then sharing that with people along the way. And so now that's become my full-time career and my full passion that I work to share in any way that I can, whether it's breath work, energy healing, teaching healers some of the things that I've learned, and so much more.
So sometimes I find that people don't quite understand the term healing. They're like, what does that mean? Like healing. Of course, you and I are in this space, and some of the listeners like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. But how would you describe healing to someone who's really new to the wellness space and to spirituality?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's funny. Every time I say I'm a healer, if someone isn't in the space, they will then say, so what's that? So what does that mean? So what I typically say is that, much of my career is around healing myself first. And then from what I've learned, and that might be from healing trauma, childhood experiences, really being intentional around my mental, physical, and spiritual health and well-being. And then really going into that like you would, study something in college or when you get a doctorate, really making that my life's work. And then from the findings and the experiences that I've shared it with people. And along the way, it became pretty clear that if I didn't eventually start charging, because at first I definitely did not know that this could be a career and I did not have any awareness on how to make money as a healer. I realized if I was going to do this full time, that I had to start charging for some of the things that I was doing. And that would include things like group energy healing and meditation classes, breath work, one-on-one sessions, or even speaking and workshops. So it's really about helping people to come back to the wholeness that's maybe lost or that has been forgotten inside of them through these different practices that I've learned over time.
And so, when did your healing journey begin? And what did you heal?
Yeah, well, I
They're like,
love that.
wait,
That's
you're
a
like,
great question.
yeah, they're like, wait, okay, I kind of get it, but like, what did she heal? Like, was it something physical? Like, was it something mental?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, I started when I was 4 years old, and I definitely have a very unique experience in that I didn't even know that what I was doing at 4 when my grandmother taught me how to meditate and astral travel, which is this practice of leaving the awareness of your body and actually stepping outside of your body to find awareness around your body or even around different parts of the room or the world. My grandmother taught me that when I was only 4. And so because I was so young, I no belief systems around that not being possible or being weird or unsafe or bad. And so I actually really took to that and started meditating from that age and becoming a very deep seeker in all paths of spirituality from that time moving forward. And so over the years, because I did have a very challenging childhood, I'm so grateful that I had that kind of foundation for my life because I experienced everything from constant moving all over the United States. We moved sometimes as many as 3 times a year. I moved every year from the ages of 0 to 14 all over the country, having experienced all sorts of trauma, physical abuse, sexual abuse. I mean, the list goes on and on. And when you have that much big T trauma and other things like addiction and alcoholism in the family, you really have to make a choice to not go down that path and to not become what you see and not to become what happens to you. And so, because I had a meditation practice, because I was a seeker and sought something outside of my own physical experience, I was able to very consciously move through what I think would have otherwise left me with a very, very painful and tragic life.
Yeah, I mean, we can all heal ourselves. It's really about healing the mind and creating those new neural pathways. But as a society, we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about it at all. And through meditation, through energy healing, and many other modalities that and done over a period of time, they are so powerful, allowing you to move forward and not be defined by the things that have happened to you, but to use those challenges as your gifts, which you have totally done in such a beautiful way.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've really over the years, and also because I moved so much as a kid, I never had a quote unquote home that I lived in for longer than 5 years or 4 years, and that was when I was actually in high school. So having spent a lot of time living all over the United States and seeing all sorts of cultures and communities, I really started to understand that there were kind of this general theme that kept coming up, and it was around just this fear of seeking something outside of religion. And then when I eventually got to more liberal towns like Boulder, Colorado, which is where I went to a few years in in middle school, excuse me, I realized that there was also a world of people who had finally kind of taken that leap outside of religion and looked into, things like psychology or meditation or some of the Eastern religions that hadn't been in the United States for as long as, say Christianity. And so when I really started to get exposure to these different communities and different ways of looking at the world in themselves, I realized like, wait, I wonder if there's a correlation here. I wonder if there's some ties that maybe nobody else is able to see. And sure enough, I found a lot of really amazing correlating themes between religion, psychology, and these non-traditional paths.
Oh, completely, completely. And so I'm curious to know if when you started to identify as a healer and start charging for your services or even creating wellness official, did it happen in your late 20s during your Saturn return?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, so Saturn Return was for me, and I'm curious, Alice, if you could give me exact dates, but when I can really pinpoint when it's obvious that it was really happening was 2017, end of 2016, 2017. Are you able to reference that in my chart? Actually, I'm curious.
Yes, let me look it up and I'll BRB, but continue
Okay.
talking about your experience.
Yeah. So I had been healing, I would say, in a more formal capacity since about 2015. And I had been a facilitator of healing experiences. I used to host and produce events like rooftop yoga in New York, London, and LA. And I would hire yoga teachers and meditation teachers. And a lot of the things that I was practicing with these teachers that I respected and went to, I noticed that they were some of the same things that I was doing privately and at home that I hadn't really shared with anyone. And so I slowly, because I was producing these events from 2012 to 2019, I decided to introduce my own approach. And so after classes, I would say, hey, if anybody needs a little healing, I'll stay here and do Reiki on you. And at the time, I'd only taken a Reiki healing class, but I had kind of been practicing my own approach for many years. And it was in 2017 that I had a complete collapse of everything, from my business, which was my first business, Serene Social, to breaking up with a boyfriend, having to scrape together whatever money I could just to pay my rent and buy my dog food. That was a really, really tough time. And that was when I had to really look at myself and say, okay, if I have always leaned on healing and healers, and I now don't have the money and I don't have the resources to go and get that support right now, I think it's time that I actually really turned that on for myself. And I then really went into the deepest practice that I think I had ever had at that time in my life. And that's when things started to really turn around, including my practice as a healer and offering that more boldly.
Yeah, so I looked it up for you, and it was starting in 2016, and a Saturn return usually lasts around 2 or 3 years. So right in 2017, it hit you.
Yes, that sounds right. See, I knew it. Yeah, I would say peak was probably April 2017. That was a really hard time. Really, really hard time.
And your Saturn placement is in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius, it's a sign that really is associated with learning and academics, but also philosophy, how we view the world. It's also the sign for international travel, for writing. And many people with a placement in Sagittarius, Saturn in Sagittarius, like myself and other people who've been on the podcast, one of the popular occupations is to be a spiritual guide and leader.
Wow. So amazing. I
And
love that.
and you have done a travel show.
Yes, I have. You did your research. I love it.
And I mean, it's award winning. And you have these beautiful, like, channeled messages. I think you post them like every single month. And that is also a form of writing, but also the writing that you do day to day is beautiful as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I could see the Sagittarius in me. My partner is a Sag. So I definitely adventure is definitely a Sagittarian way. And I love adventure. I love travel and philosophy. So that makes sense.
Those are the ways that were challenging things for us, during our Saturn return, because Saturn is really just trying to make sure that you're on the right path. And if you're not, that planet, that energy is really going to push you. But it's almost like you have to go through this process of so much pressure to become a diamond.
Yes. And for me, and I wonder if this is really, really resonating with anyone who's listening. For me, my Saturn return was really not about so much my career trajectory or, what I was doing in my day to day, because I was actually very much pointed in the right direction of my purpose. But what it really came down to for me, Alice, was I was so afraid of my own power. I was so deferral in my power. In fact, I was so easy to back down because just being who I was so triggering for so many of the people that I had around me and for so many of the people that I had been raised by. And so it was really a very clear message and a very harsh reckoning of, okay, are you going to listen to your intuition or not? Are you going to believe in your intelligence or not? Are you going to believe in your vision and your ability to bring it to fruition or not? And how strong will you allow yourself to be? How authentic will you allow yourself to be? And those were really the biggest questions that were the most painful, because it came from very, very deep wounds from a very young age. And once I was finally able to really be self-reflective and responsible for how I had actually created so much of the chaos that was happening in my life because of my own fear of my strength and my authenticity, was when I really had a breakthrough in that era of my life.
Oh, I feel that. And I feel that we go through those periods of time constantly, those cycles.
Yes.
Every few years. I know that, since now that I live in Los Angeles, by moving here, I've told people, I'm like, I'm meeting my destiny. And it's scary. I mean, it's scary. I'm like, wait, this is where I'm supposed to be. Something is going to happen here.
Yeah.
That is going to kind of change the trajectory of my life, or kind of like it's always supposed to be this way. It's always been like this. But when you kind of actually see it, it's very frightening. And as women and women of color, it has not been safe ancestrally, historically, for us to be seen and to be in our power. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult. And I know that, your North and South Node placement, your South Node is in Libra. So it's very easy for you to be a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. And when you're a people pleaser and you want the harmony and the balance, because Libra is a sign of the scales, like you lose yourself and your boundaries become so porous.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's really funny. It's so interesting that is something that shows up in my chart, because I think one of the things that I understand, at least from the human design world and just my own life experience, is as a projector, the irony of that is that I also can see things. Yeah. I can really see things. I can see things that nobody wants to look at. And I just can't help but to look at it. My boyfriend was joking with me yesterday. He's like, you're the person who sees the elephant in the room and can't help but to say something. Like you just can't help it. And so there's that really interesting tension. And I'm sure so many of us can relate, where I have this desire to really make friends. And also remember, I moved almost multiple years or multiple times a year for most of my life. So this desire to really connect with people and have people feel safe and comfortable around me, but then also being able to see what sometimes doesn't make people feel so warm and bubbly inside, and really having a hard time withholding that. And so that walking that line and being that person who is still being true to myself, seeing what I see, but not always saying what isn't ready to be said. That's been a really interesting walk to walk.
Oh, you know what that is. You know what that is. That's that North Node in Aries.
Oh, is that what it is? Tell us more. I didn't even know. That's awesome.
Okay. So for those, need a refresher on the North and South nodes. The North Node is what you're meant to be doing in this lifetime, the lessons you need to learn. It's kind of like your life's purpose. And your South Node is past life, karma, things that come easily to you. So people pleasing, making sure everyone's in harmony, bringing people together. But when you step into your power, it is when you act from an Aries nature, which, it's a cardinal sign. It starts off like the zodiac. It's very powerful. It's a visionary. It's a leader. And Aries, they from, let's say, like if you have any Aries friends, they don't hold back.
Yep.
They do not hold back. And sometimes like their tongues can be a little sharp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But with your placements and, all the things that you've been doing and you're meant to be doing, I feel like the way that you're able to kind of shine a light on things is a very caring way. It's kind of like, maybe you should pay attention to this.
Yes. And this is why people come to me for healing, because, I was really laughing about this a couple of weeks ago. I just went to Esalen and taught uh, this amazing historical retreat center, and I was just feeling so seen and understood and welcome to share what I could see. And one of the women just couldn't believe that I felt so honored that she would ask me some of the questions she was asking me. And I said, do you know that I've been waiting my whole life to be in this position? Because when you're 10 and you want to say the thing and you want to like give the feedback, it doesn't always go so well. But when you eventually get into, a more mature stage in life and you really have been through stuff, I've really seen a lot, lived many, many lives. I really am just like so honored to be in this position, to be asked, what do I think? To be asked, what can I see? Because it's really like a fulfillment of my purpose to be able to share that.
I mean, it's your Chiron and Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
It's your Chiron and Gemini because it's like the wound of not being seen.
Yes.
And then not being able to speak what you want to speak and because of what you see. And as a projector, I'm also a projector myself. Like
That's
it
right.
is so frustrating when you can't share what you see,
Yes.
or you go into an organization or even one-on-one with a client, but they are not ready to receive,
Yes.
and there's so much friction, and you're like, I don't understand, like we could make more money this way, or you could heal yourself, like if you just did this one small thing, this one small change. And it's almost kind of like, is it the Greek mythology story of Atlas who pushes
Yes.
the earth, like, or not earth, like
Stone.
just like a
Stone.
big like a stone ball like up the hill.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And that's, I think there's something to be said. I'm not sure exactly where in my chart this is for the projector side of things, but, they say that after 30 for me, that's when there's really a turning point where kind of
Mm-hmm.
the failures and the not being acknowledged went away. And it's just so beautiful to me because literally, when I turned 30, as I was going to my 30th year, 29 coming into 30, it was like, oh my God, things are different. What used to be so hard, what used to be a struggle, so much of my pursuing of my dreams and my vision, which I did adamantly for over a decade, was just a slog. And although I had a lot of synchronicity and magic and alignment, it was always very challenging. It was always very much a struggle, full with failure and big wins, but more failure. And so when I finally crossed that threshold, and I would assume it was after the completion of my first Saturn return, things just felt easier and lighter. And now I'm in a place where I've spent the past couple of years reorienting the understanding of living a life without struggle, and that things actually do come very easy to me now. And I have to be honest, after all of that, I feel like I finally deserve it.
Yeah. So, what advice do you have with people who have been struggling for a long time? And like, how did you keep the faith? How did you keep on going? Because sometimes it could, I mean, 10 years, it feels like a lifetime. It feels like that's what life is. So how did you maintain faith that things would change? Or did you think that maybe this was life? A lot of ups and downs.
Well, I always listen to people that I look up to on YouTube, and always love biographies and really pay attention to quotes to people in history. And I have so many memories of people like Oprah saying, I always knew that this was temporary, that I would be somebody. I'm paraphrasing what she said, but that's a theme that I would see a lot throughout history. And I had that feeling too. I had that feeling like, I don't know what this is. I don't know why I've been suffering for so long, but I know that I'm supposed to have a different experience. I know that I'm meant for something important and powerful and impactful to make this world a better place. I just had a feeling.
Mm.
I had to continually immerse myself in that understanding. And that to me is why faith is such a bold and powerful gift that we have as humans to employ on this physical realm. And it's actually why it's the one tattoo that I have. It says by faith on my wrist, so that I can remember that's the merging of my spiritual and physical force as a human, to have faith and to see things through that lens, looking at what's not in front of me, but what I can see within me. And so when I really, really think about whoever is out there listening, who's struggling, who has been struggling for a while, as someone who was on the other side of that long experience, because it wasn't just 10 years once I was an adult, it was this first 17 years when I was a child as well. So really thinking about 27 years of really being in the struggle, knowing that something was better ahead of me that still was not in my reality. What I'm saying to you on the other side is it is freaking worth it. Every bit of it. Every bit of it.
And, one has to remember that for those who seem like or feel like they're struggling so much more than the others, like their peers, their friends, their family, I would say all healers have to go through a lot of struggles, a lot of challenges, a lot of darkness so that they viscerally understand what it means to be there and they know how to pull other people out.
Yes. Yes. I am not afraid. I am not afraid of anything that my clients are going through or have been through or have done because I have been to some of the darkest experiences that you can have as a human. I mean, that is to be able to say that and to know that you can be on the other side is really, I believe, what makes you a master healer. It's not that I don't have a lot more to learn and a lot further to go in my own practice as a person, let alone a healer. But what I can say is I know that I have gone to places that most people have not, and I have gone through them with grace and intention. And so that's why I have the ability to hold space, because I know what it takes to move through.
So beautiful. Yes. The just the experiences alone. I want people to remember that, our challenges and our struggles are our greatest gifts. They
Yes.
truly, truly are.
Yes. When I have wonderful days or challenging days, I often think about the me who was living on someone's couch, which I did many, many times for many years, who had nothing, who only had a dream and a vision and couldn't quite figure it all out. But just thinking about that version of me who didn't give up. And I'm just so deeply proud and so deeply grateful for that version of me who was really the ancestor of who I am today. So, that not giving up and putting in that time, they say an overnight success takes at least 10 years. People see me now and they're like, wow, Millana. And I'm like, you have no idea. And even what I say on these podcasts can't really put into words what it looks like when you don't have a home for years, or when you really don't have money to buy food. That kind of experience, that kind of fortitude is something that truly now I'm so grateful that I got to go through and get to this side now.
I mean, it's also so inspirational for others who they don't know anyone else who's been able to lift themselves out of a situation like that. And they see
Yes.
someone like you, someone who also looks like them, and
Yes.
is like, I can do it.
Yes, you can do it.
I can do it.
And not everybody chooses to continue through that kind of darkness. So be the very few unique handful of people around the world who will say yes no matter what.
I'd love to know what you learned in this episode. And if you're going through a Saturn return, what support do you need? And what has it been like for you? Has it been kind of like a bit of a soul wrenching experience and you kind of having so many existential questions? Or have you been coasting through it because you've already been on your path, which big kudos to you. Now, these episodes about Saturn return aren't just for people who are going through their Saturn return, which happens in your late 20s, mid to late 50s, as well as mid to late 80s. It's really a source of inspiration for people who are trying to just make a change in their lives, wanting to do something different, but afraid of taking the leap. I know that for myself, whenever I'm going through a big transition, it's so helpful to hear the stories of other people because I'm like, they made it through, I can make it through as well. And they also have wonderful tips and tricks of kind of like, what do they do to kind of get through this kind of rocky time? So I hope that it's been inspirational to you. And if you think that someone would benefit from this episode, share it with them. And if you haven't rated the podcast 5 stars, I would be so appreciative if you rated it 5 stars. And if you feel compelled to make a donation, you can find that in the show notes as well. Your support means so much to me. If you're interested in spirituality and how that helps with building a business and figuring out your career, don't miss the next episode that's dropping same time next week. All right, have a wonderful day. And as always, I am wishing you so much joy and so much abundance in your life.